Hi, Michael. I had answered some of the questions on the next move, and it was like, wow, this is a book. So I made a video, and the video is still like 35 minutes long. I'm trying to, cover all the bases and keep it as small and fast as I can. So to answer your general question about how can we scale this thing up to reach wider audiences, I think there's like maybe three strategies I can think of. One is if we gain the attention of a streaming service, then obviously they pay for it, we provide it up there, and we can say, well, we did it. The downside of that is that it can get buried. They might not market it, and it's just like, well, we tried it again and it failed. We tried Bandersnatch, that did marginally well, and then we tried this other guy and that failed, and that did marginally well or whatever, and it just kind of falls back into the gimmick or fad stage. So there's a plus and a minus there. The plus is they pay for it. The minus is I don't really think there's a longevity to going with a larger streaming service. If there is a niche streaming service that's hungry for content, there's some Christian sites out there that don't have hardly any content. And if something like them or like that, a niche group, wanted to get our content, that might be better because they're going to curate it, they're going to baby it, they're going to get it out there, and it can reach an audience that's dedicated to them. So it's a smaller audience, but they're more dedicated, they're like loyal fans. And I've done that way with the video games in the past, and we've still got a kind of a cult following. So there is some advantages to doing it that way. And then the third way would be to hire a marketing firm and just have them market the snot out of it while we host it on Patreon or on Steam or something like that. And so we just kind of get this crowdfunding deal going. I have not had a lot of success with crowdfunding, and I think that it could work, but I would want to kind of hand the reins over to a marketing firm that knows what they're doing. So those are three ways I can think of that it would scale up. Just going over your comments. So thank you about your critique of the execution of the filmmaking. Very cool compliment. Um, you had talked about some of the elements within the story, like phone tracking and her rebelliousness and things. A lot of those we'll keep in the pilot, but it'll probably have a lot of new, different things as well. More characters, for example, more locations, things like this. And skipping to number 4, about you were talking about urgency versus her nonchalance, and yeah, this is something that I want to fix. I've got an idea of how to do it through something called emotional variance. So this is where a scene is shot several times, each with a slightly different emotional variance, and this is something that the actor is going to have to determine. For example, we shoot it normal, then we shoot it where the actor is stressed, and then accusatory, and then angry, and the emotion can be portrayed through dialogue. Whatever they're saying. Like, well, I really dislike that, or how could you possibly do that? So we've got variations. We could keep the dialogue fairly the same, but we've got variations in emotional tonality, but also it can be portrayed through action. So you're cutting carrots just normally, and then you're really just chopping these carrots, or you are exiting the room normally, or you're slamming the door. So the characters can say and do nearly the same things. Uh, the logical outcome of the scene is the same for no matter what their emotional variant is. So, for example, a husband and wife are arguing in the kitchen, and he goes to leave and he slams the door. Or the husband and the wife are just working out their disagreements. So it's really logically the exact same, just we take all the emotion out of it. And he says, okay, I'm leaving for work. And he walks out the door rather than, okay, I'm leaving for work. So you can't I don't think you can do verbatim the same dialogue, but you can do nearly the same, and that can actually be up to the actors to determine how they want to put a logical, an emotional flavor onto the scene. Um, Regardless, even though the scene is the same logically, the audience sees it as a totally different movie. Because the audience is kind of like in this state of mind where they're really tapped into the emotional quality, the emotional ride of what's going on. So they're going to view each variation as a unique experience. And I don't want to go to the extremes, of course, because as with any new technique, you can just really make it goofy. So I'm not going to have people, like I said, yelling a marriage proposal or talking politely during a shootout. So there's definitely an art to it. Uh, so the emotional variance, when we do that, it can smooth out these transitions you were talking about, urgency versus nonchalance. And I'll say where that happens in just a minute here in the code. From the production standpoint, it ends up being more bang for buck because we don't have to do this infinitely forking story in order to make it interesting to the audience. We tell one story, but we tell it from very different emotional points of view. So the audience is like, wow, there's two people explaining what happened last night on, their episode on their favorite TV show, and one of them's like, I couldn't believe how angry that guy was at the end. He had no right to be that angry, and the other person's like, what are you talking about? They were just getting along fine, and they're like, oh, I must have picked the wrong, thing because everybody was yelling at everybody and it was crazy. So we want to kind of inspire those types of curious conversations of people talking about the entertainment. So from a production standpoint, it's easy bang for buck. The audience perceives each variation uniquely, but the story doesn't fork. So instead of shooting an exponential number of shots, we only need like 2 or 3. So given the right actor, the variations can be delivered in one sitting. The variations need to span 2 consecutive scenes. So if we have normal, stressful, angry in this scene, we need to have those same things present in the next scene or sequence. And the reason for that is because in code, we're going to step the emotions up and down, and we want a smooth transition there. So it needs to span 2 consecutive scenes, and how that works in code is each character has an emotional statistic which is increased and decreased. For example, if the character's anger level is 2, then they might be appearing accusatory on the screen. And perhaps they storm out of the room and slam a door. In the next scene, they might meet a kind old lady, and so that calms them down a little bit, and their emotion drops to anger level 1 while they're talking to the lady. And she's like, well, how are you doing? And they're like, I just had a fight with my wife. But if they didn't have a fight with their wife, then she'd say, well, how are you doing? And it's like, oh, I'm pretty good. I was just talking to my wife. So just a little bit of a variation there, but the logic is the same. And then through going back to the first one where they're angry, and then they meet a kind old lady, and it drops to 1, and then by the end of the conversation, it's actually going to transition to 0. So it's up to the actor to make sure that they're not doing emotions that are so far apart that you can't that it's an obvious jump. You want them closer together so it makes this gradual decrease in emotions. Interesting post-edit credit scene. What is the intended duration? The short answer is if the story forks, then the branch should rejoin with the main storyline after like one sequence to avoid the infinitely forking story problem. Now for the really long answer. The sequences should present no more than one logical alteration to the story. So the reason that you have a sequence is to move the story forward. We want to move the story forward and change one thing and then get back onto the main storyline. And that one thing that's changed is going to pop back up later. Like we don't want to have like 2 main storylines running, for the duration of the experience. We want to go out of the main storyline. We want to do something, and then we want to come back to the main storyline, and that changes either the audience's perception of what happened. I'm talking logically, not emotionally. That changes their perception about what happened logically in the story. Like, oh, she does have a gun right now, even though they can't see it. We want to change just one thing in that sequence, which is showing a new character, a new location, or a new item. So new characters should be not main characters. They don't change. They don't grow. They're like the embodiment of something, a symbol. It's like, I'm going to go out into the woods. I'm going to find this wise old woman that lives out in the woods, and I'm going to get some advice from her, and that's going to change my perspective. And then I'm going to come back to the main storyline. The audience is like, wow, her perspective really changed. But it's the same main storyline. And then if there's an emotional variant in there, we want to make sure that that ebbs and flows as well. So with that, if we do it that way, then it's less filming, but we still get a lot of variation. Any future episodes, so mostly what I'm answering here is just for a single pilot, but if there were any future episodes where that new character is gonna emerge again, that kind old lady in the woods, then we just film those as inserts. It's like, oh, one of the main characters, Mary, is going to go off into the woods secretly, and nobody can see her. And she's going to meet with the old woman, and the old woman's going to give her some advice, and then she's going to go away. So it could be that new characters are going to give advice, or they give an item, like, here, child, take this magic apple, or take this gun, or they can give information about another location. So here's another example. The security guard in the prototype is a personification of oppression. He's like a boogeyman in the forest, and he only shows up to chase the main character. So we might have like an old lady or a spy that you meet like somewhere, or a black market salesman, characters like that, and they can alter the story logically. Like I said, they can make a fork, and then we want to hide whatever that was and reveal it later. I don't mean hide it from the audience. I mean just not show it on film. We don't want to have to film it twice. Like let's say somebody gave the main character a gun. We want that gun put like secluded somewhere in a backpack or something, so we're not filming it twice. And then if they have the gun, it comes out, and the guy's like, and now we have to film one scene where the guy's like, I got a gun and I'm going to use it. Or we film the normal scene where the guy's like, man, I wish I had a gun, I would use it, or whatever he says. The new characters could alter the story logically, or they could just flavor the story emotionally. For example, the security guard might just serve to give the audience a scare, or the audience might encounter several security guards over a few episodes, and then in the season finale, if you have encountered so many security guards, then the security forces are going to invade the camp at the season finale. So that's a way that it changes the actual logic of the story. So new items. In the prototype, the reveal of the gun will logically fork the story later. Forking the story's logic even once can have a snowball effect later. So the fork has to be presented in a memorable way to the audience and then hidden away from them. In the prototype, I didn't want to shoot the main character with and without a holstered gun, so we made use of a backpack. And then during the gun reveal, we use a cinematic trick and pause, kind of awkwardly on the backpack while the conversation is still going on. And then the audience is like, what? Am I supposed to be paying attention to this gun? And they remember it. So later on, in the prototype, if she gets accosted by the guard and she saw the gun, then she can escape. Otherwise, she's killed. So in that sense, it does change the logic of the story. In a series, if we were to do a series, killing off a main character means killing them off for every eventuality, because we don't want to be shooting them as alive and then here's this other reality where they're not alive. We don't want to do that. Possibly they do get murdered, or maybe they sacrifice themselves to save someone else, or maybe they are kidnapped by a mysterious group, or they run away. They're just sick and tired of everything. In any of those cases, we can do that typically with one sequence and maybe some foreshadowing, but one sequence pretty much, and it all has the same logical outcome. So in the case where she was murdered or she sacrificed herself, then we have a funeral scene that we have to intercut in there. So we don't want to. The main idea is we don't want to have to be doing two parallel stories at the same time. So the rest of the characters, it might have a funeral. Okay, new locations might alter the story logically, as in the discovery of an item. So I find a depot of food or weapons, or I find an old house with a diary in it, or a mysterious record player. So that alters the story logically a little bit. Or it might emotionally flavor the story, such as I encounter a mass grave. I'm not going to actually take anything from there. It's just going to flavor the story emotionally, like, wow, it's, there's mass graves in this world, or a new security outpost is being built, and so we feel the encroachment of oppression, or we discover a beautiful untouched part of the forest. It's this oasis of beauty in a world of depressive gray tones. So uh, so a location can just serve emotionally like that as well. So also characters, items, and locations can lead to other characters, items, and locations within the same sequence. So we can string all these kind of things together into a kind of stretch the runtime. For example, an informant, which is a character, might give a map, an item, one of the main characters, and it takes them to a munition stockpile. So then they follow this map to a location, and that produces items, which would be guns. And then they enter the main storyline, and it's the exact same story at that point. How complex will it be to create a full-length movie? Probably not as complex as my video here, but bookending it, the complexity in terms of time should be no more greater than 4 times what it would take to create a linear version. And I think that using some production tricks, it can be 2 or 3 times, I don't know for sure. But during pre-production, the logic of the story has to be nailed down so that we know how many branches we have, what's going to happen in those branches. We don't know the emotional qualities of those yet, but definitely the logic has to be nailed down. That is the main storyline, and then all of its inserts, where you put little inserts in there, and branches that come back into it. The dialogue of the main storyline should be written in pre-production, but if we do emotional variations, whenever we do those can be kind of generally defined. We want, mad, sad, glad, or variations of that. And then we want the actors to actually take hold of that. If we put that impetus on the writers are going to try to be racking their brains, coming up with all this stuff, and then we have to translate that to the actors, and the actors are like, I don't know what you mean by this. So it's better to just say, hey, can you do this scene mad? Can you do this scene slightly less mad? And can you do this scene really angry? It's less writing as well. So getting good actors that are good at, ad lib, and I think that's going to be more cost effective than trying to write 3 emotional variations and trying to explain that to everybody. One idea is to have the main characters living in an RV village that's like shanties and tents and RVs that are huddled together. And the concept of an RV village, as we were talking on the phone, is pertinent to kind of what's going on in America right now with homelessness and tent cities, and that's in bigger cities, but even in my town, we have a couple of RV villages already because people just can't get into houses. So the cool thing is, here's the trick. All those RVs now become also they double as our production office, our actors' quarters, our lighting truck, food truck, all that. And so we're going to be pulling double duty there, and also it's faster to create because we don't have to take all that stuff and put it off of the set. And if somebody leaves a tool sitting around or whatever, it's like that's fine as long as it's not markedly cinematic equipment. If somebody has cables or whatever running around, it's fine. That's part of their village. So it's a little trick that we can do. The time period is post society, so there are amenities that we have today, like they're going to dress in normal clothes. They're going to, everything's going to look fairly normal. There are running cars, but a lot of this stuff is hard to find, so it's fairly Spartan. Many of the cities are still functional but desolate. That might be a bit of a challenge to film, like filming in a ghost town or something that looks like the Rust Belt. So costumes and vehicles look very much like today. And then occasionally there's a bit of tech. The TV show The Peripheral is a great example of what post-society might look like. Or they're more like early stage post-society. I'm going to do a little bit later, so there's a little bit more danger involved. A lot of familiar things will make it cheaper and easier to make. And then scenes which happen inside the RV village are going to be dramatic. And then scenes that happen outside the RV village are going to be action. And I want to kind of separate those two and have 2 groups and 2 directors. The group that I'm working with has a female director who can handle drama and a male actor who can handle action. And they are growing in they're growing in notoriety or recognition. They're doing well, and I would like to use these guys. I might want to use 2 different composers for that, but I think there needs to be a lead composer. I'm not sure exactly how that would work, and I want the composer and or composers to be writing during pre-production, writing sketches for the music, so that we have that right when we shoot. It doesn't have to be finished, but I need sketches. So also, the software will begin during pre-production. There's some tools which need to be written, which will allow the editors to fine-tune the jumps so they can get it like to the, to the frame, frame to frame, and that software, we're gonna make sure that it's just bare bones. So it's just mission critical stuff, and it will grow as we need it. But what I imagine is that it will save some time at the beginning, but we also need time. We need to slow down the process because we need people to think about how they're doing this and understand how it works. So as the people grow, the software grows, and eventually it'll be a really awesome tool that people know how to use. But at first, I just want to make it kind of mission critical as needed. Um, my role during pre-production is going to be to sit in the writers' meetings, make sure the software gets done, and make sure everybody is thinking in terms of the limits and possibilities of interactive film. And then I need to kind of stay out of the way. I need them to kind of write the story around, the vision. I made up the vision, right? But I need them to kind of write the story, and I need to stay out of their way. I don't want to have all my fingers in the pot like I did with the prototype. I thought it was necessary for the prototype because it was so new that everybody needed that help. But now I've trained up those people, and they can go, and then I can just be there to read the dailies, or read what they wrote that day and say, this is great, this is not going to work, and here's the reason why. This is great, and this will work fine, and here we need to reduce the budget over there. There's also a producer that has worked with these people that might be able to help me with that, but that's my job. Right now, I'm only thinking of a pilot. In the future, there are, if there's going to be multiple episodes, then pre-production does become more complex. The branches and inserts that characters and locations, which may or may not show up, should probably be done all at once. So if we do have the wise woman out in the woods, typically in a series, you just go and you shoot that as you need it every week. But I would say, like, okay, we want to have this character, we want to have that, and we want to shoot it all in one day and get it done. So production for a 40-minute interactive pilot should cost about the same as a 2-hour linear movie of the same quality. The pilot should be, shot in the spring, summer, fall, and the location should deliberately be like secluded in some trees for shade and protection against rain. Just because I want to shoot outside, it's easier. We don't have to set up lights. We don't have to have a generator 10 miles away, in a sound baffle. And it's just easier. The only problem is it can get boiling hot, and it can rain, and it can do all these things within the span of a couple of weeks. So I want to have it kind of sheltered within some trees. That fits with the motif of an RV park. And I want to have electricity nearby. With the right location, we avoid needing a full light truck. I want to have a couple of boom operators on there, and so I can avoid Foley and ADR as much as possible. So I kind of want to have two sound teams. One's doing ambience, one's doing close up on whatever they're fidgeting with. One's doing dialogue, that kind of thing. One of the interactive branches may even show some behind the scenes footage. We might have a BTS crew on there, and their only job is to capture just what's going on when the DP says rolling and the director says cut. So we're going to have those shots that can run parallel to the actual footage that we got, and then that can be kind of like an Amazon X-ray type of experience where it's like, well, I wonder what they're doing at craft services while this is going on. What's one of the stars? What are they doing? Are they in the makeup chair? Are they telling jokes? Because people are going to want to know, how is this thing made? So I think that's going to be awesome. Also, I want to be running post-production at the same time as production, like one day later, and they're going to be doing rough cuts. They're going to be putting it into the software. We're going to see if it works, if what we shot the day before works, so that we just kind of get rid of all sorts of challenges that can cause stress later. Because after that, we will have another post-production where we're tightening everything up and writing the actual music and things like that. But I want to get as much of it done on site as possible. I think that will help with everybody that's involved. That we don't have to pay for a crew of 30 people to come back out and shoot something because the interactivity was wonky and we didn't know it. So I want to just make sure everything is perfect. My job during production will be to ensure that everyone can do their job. So there'll be a producer on set. So I'd be like an extra set of hands to solve problems that arise from making an interactive movie. I'll be also overlooking post-production, making sure that we have usable interactive product. But I'm going to stay away from the director's choices. So if I'm confident enough that these guys will do way better than I ever could. So I want to just stay away from them and let them work their magic, and the end result will be it'll be awesome. During post-production, I want to be avoiding any heavy visual effects and rely on the emotional craftsmanship to carry the story. So focusing on dramatic performance, suspenseful music, off-screen tension, elements like that. So no explosions or lasers, or we got to remove everybody's legs and stuff like that. The editing team is going to be doing rough cuts about 1 day behind. And at that same time, the music is roughed in. That's during production, so that during post-production, our job is really easy. So, and then my job just during post-production is to make sure that the final product is both a standalone linear movie and also that the interactivity flows seamlessly. Okay, so and then you were talking about I think a theater experience that had some goggles and things like this. I think right now the target is just purely streaming. The way I think of that is like X-Files was this great TV show, and then it did so well that they made a movie. And I think that's the way that I would approach this is like the streaming interactive experience is so awesome that they are going to do a theatrical release of something, and then people go there. The way that they would interact, I think, is through their cell phone, and that would be running concurrently with whatever's on the big screen, and then they're just going to tap on what choices they want, and instead of everybody viewing a different choice, instead it's going to compile everything and vote. So you're like, no, Luke Skywalker should kill Darth Vader, or whatever it is, and you're like, and you're voting, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, he forgave Darth Vader, and half the audience is like, yeah, and the other half is like, ah. So it could be something like that, but I think that's a secondary viewing experience. Perceived advantages and disadvantages. So the advantage to the viewer is that the interactive film can feed into their desire to see a certain outcome happen. The proverbial, like, do I grab the flashlight or the gun, in the haunted house. So when the viewer has the option to mold the world, mold the world they're seeing into something that they want to see, then they start forming an emotional bond with the entertainment and exploring all the different outcomes, but not like you have to do it, but you want to do it. Everybody right now is a gamer, and they get it. They understand that there can be different outcomes, and a lot of people are already engaging actively in entertainment, basically like teasers and trailers, followed by let's discuss what we watched last night, followed by let's talk about how they made that movie, followed by let's talk about the movie while we're watching it. So people are really engaging actively all around film and kind of in film, and so this is kind of the next step to that. So the biggest disadvantage, I think, will be, or the biggest pitfall, I should say, is the execution of the psychology of the interaction. Like bungling that is going to is going to break it, but getting that right is going to make it. So I believe that movies are firstly a passive experience. If they're active, they should be optionally active. So here's a common scenario with a lot of interactive film throughout the years. A viewer gets settled in, they put themselves into that slightly hypnotic state of suspension of disbelief, and they get into the film, and then boom, the film is interrupted, and they're like, do you want to put on red socks or blue socks? I'm really angry that I was pulled out of my hypnotic state. I cannot relax. So I think that forcing the viewer out of their passive frame of mind and jamming them into an active frame of mind is like a nuisance. The interaction should be non-invasive, and it should be a curious invitation, but not a demand. And if a person simply wishes to watch the main storyline, there should be no interruption or even pressure to, there should be prompts, but not like pressure, like you got to do it. So when the interactive moments do present themselves, so they should pique curiosity, not anxiousness. Nobody should feel like they have to hurry up and pick all the choices to win at watching the film. So this is all in the artistic execution of the craftsmanship of film. This is how we, make sure that people are feeling good about what they're watching. So they should feel, audiences should feel like there's an open door invitation to explore something new, or to continue on the path they're on with no detriment. Whatever the choice they make, even if they don't make any choice at all, they still get an entertainment value from it. That's something I learned with idle games is you want to reward. You don't want to reward and punish. You want to reward and then reward them even more, depending on what choice they make. So having similarly, on the flip side of that coin, having too few of choices is going to feel also lopsided. Like any good game, there should be peaks and valleys that ebb and flow from active and passive. This is an art form, and it should target general audiences in order to be successful. So nothing wacky, nothing extreme. And then we all should expect that not everybody is going to be vibing with the interaction. Some people are going to be like, it's triggering my anxiety. It's like, okay, I get that. We'll put a warning on there next time. And some people are going to be like, this is boring. I can't even rotate my character. It's like, well, it's not that kind of a game. So I think we want to target general audiences. Lastly, I think the psychology of playing on natural curiosity can be heightened intentionally. So we don't want to put the pressure on there, but we do want to. No, go away. For example, if there's a mysterious house in the background of a shot, most people are going to want to click on that mysterious house. Now, we're not saying they have to, but we want to make people feel like they are doing something like that out of their own curiosity. Most people are going to do it anyway, right? So it's a highly alluring invitation to interact. We can heighten the curiosity. If there's a security force that's invading the RV village at the end, and the one guy that could save them all is this total wimp, and he's by the rack of guns. They did this in Private Ryan. Remember, it's like shoot the guy, but he wouldn't shoot him. So wouldn't it be great if you could just click on that, and finally the guy is like dun 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 dun, boom boom, and he saves everybody, and you're like, yeah. So that's the kind of heightened curiosity that we want to gently place within the story to help people to actually interact. But we don't want to force them. It's like interactive film is like a fickle woman. You want to have a heightened curiosity, but you don't want to force them. Is there anything I'm not understanding? No, I don't think so. I think you got it. Everything that I've said anyway. All right. Thanks very much, Michael.